England, 1817. The rain fell over London in cold, deliberate sheets, as if the heavens themselves mourned the fate of Lady Alara Whitmore. She stood by the parlor window of her crumbling family estate, the Whitmore Manor, once known for its glittering balls and laughter, now drowned in debt and silence. Her father's gambling had ruined them. Her mother's frail health had sealed their fate, and now a single letter lay open on the table before her. An offer, or perhaps a command. The Duke of Blackthorn had proposed marriage. Alara's hand trembled as she traced the black seal, the cold wax bearing the Duke's crest, a raven in flight. The man's reputation was legend in whispered tones across every ballroom in England. They said he was ruthless in business, unfeeling in nature, a man who had once watched his own brother die on the battlefield without shedding a tear. They said women feared him, and now she was to marry him. Better the devil you know, my dear, her father had said with shaking hands, clutching his brandy glass. The Duke's offer will save this family. You'll be safe, and your mother will have her medicine. Safe. The word echoed bitterly in Alara's mind. Safe, at the cost of her freedom. Safe, in the arms of a man whose name alone could chill a ballroom. She pressed her palm against the glass, watching the storm rage outside. In that reflection, pale skin, copper hair, and hollow eyes, she barely recognized the girl who once dreamt of love. 2 days later, the carriage wheels rolled through the iron gates of Blackthorn Hall. The estate rose like a shadow from the mist, vast, gray, and silent, as though carved from the very bones of winter. When the butler announced her arrival, the great hall fell utterly still, and there he stood, Dorian Ashford, the Duke of Blackthorn. He was tall, broad, shouldered, his presence consuming the room before a word was even spoken. His dark hair framed sharp features, a jaw sculpted in defiance, eyes as unreadable as onyx. "Alara Whitmore," he said slowly, as if testing the sound of her name, "I trust your journey was tolerable." His voice was deep calm, but with a shadow beneath it, the kind of tone that warned one not to lie. "It was long, Your Grace," she replied, curtsying low, "but I am honored to be here." He studied her too long, too silently, until she felt her pulse tremble beneath his gaze. Then, finally, he turned away. "You'll find this house has rules," he said, his tone clipped. "You will dine with me each evening. You will not enter the West Wing, and you will not ask about my late wife." A silence thickened between them. He had not married her yet, not officially, but already. She felt the chains of his world tightening around her. Still, she lifted her chin. "And if I obey all your rules, Your Grace." His dark eyes met hers, cold and steady. "Then you'll find me a fair husband," he said softly. "And if I don't?" He stepped closer. The faintest ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Then you'll find out why they call me Ruthless." That night, Alara lay awake in the vast, unfamiliar bed of the East Chamber, her heart thudding beneath the silence. Somewhere in the corridor below, she could hear the Duke's heavy boots pacing, back and forth, and though she didn't yet understand why, every step he took echoed like a warning. The morning of the wedding dawned gray, silent, and cold. No music filled the chapel, no laughter drifted through the air, only the heavy tolling of the bells, echoing like a dirge instead of a celebration. Lady Alara Whitmore sat before a cracked mirror in the guest chamber of Blackthorn Hall, her hands resting in her lap. Her gown was beautiful, ivory lace, with tiny pearls sewn along the sleeves. But her reflection looked nothing like a bride's. The girl staring back at her looked like someone going to war. Her maid, a timid creature named Nora, adjusted her veil and whispered, "My lady, he's waiting in the chapel." Alara nodded faintly. "Is he?" "Everyone is," Nora added softly. "Everyone," Alara repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. There were no friends here, no family other than her father, who sat at the front pew, already imagining the debts paid and reputation restored. She took one last look in the mirror. "Let's go then," she whispered, though her heart begged her to run. The chapel was lit with hundreds of candles, but it still felt cold. At the far end of the aisle stood Dorian Ashford, Duke of Blackthorn, tall, composed, unreadable. The black of his suit made him seem carved from shadow itself. As she walked toward him, the murmurs of the gathered guests seemed to fade, replaced only by the steady thrum of her heartbeat. Her father gave her away with trembling pride. "A fine match," he muttered under his breath, unaware of how tightly she gripped the bouquet to stop her hands from shaking. When the vows began, her voice faltered only once, on the word obedience. Dorian's gaze flickered, barely noticeable, but enough to send a strange current between them. And then it was done. The Duke of Blackthorn leaned forward and brushed her lips with his, in the faintest, coldest kiss she had ever known. The church applauded softly. She was now a duchess, by name, if not by heart. Hours later, the wedding feast unfolded in the grand hall. Tables overflowed with golden pheasant, candied fruit, and wine. Yet the air remained suffocating. The guests spoke in whispers, their glances darting to the newlyweds as if they were part of a morbid spectacle. The poor girl, one lady murmured behind her fan. He's been widowed for years. They say he still keeps her portrait in the West Wing. Indeed, another replied. They say she died in childbirth. Some say it was his doing. Ilara's grip on her wineglass tightened. When she dared to glance toward her husband, she found him already watching her, eyes dark, unfathomable, unreadable. "Does the gossip trouble you?" he asked quietly. Once they were alone at the head table. "I don't listen to rumors," she replied, though her voice betrayed her. "Good," he said, "because in this house, the truth is rarely kind." And with that, he rose, offering his arm. "Come, Duchess, it's time you saw what you've married into." He led her down long corridors lined with portraits of men who shared his jaw, his eyes, his solemnity. At the end of the hall, a pair of great oak doors loomed, the entrance to his study. Inside, the fire burned low, and the scent of tobacco lingered. On the desk lay letters, unopened, sealed with the same raven crest that marked his proposal. "This will be your home now," he said, his tone quieter than before. "You are free to roam anywhere in this manor." He paused. "Except the West Wing." Ilara lifted her gaze. "And if I ask what lies there?" His eyes flickered with something, grief perhaps, or warning. "Then I shall remember that you were told not to." That night, Ilara sat before the fire in her bedchamber, still dressed in her wedding gown. The rain had returned, tapping softly against the windows. Somewhere beyond the walls, she could hear his footsteps, deliberate, steady, always near, yet never coming closer. When the door finally opened, she froze. Dorian stood there, still in his wedding attire, his face half shadowed by the firelight. "You should rest," he said quietly. "So should you," she replied. A long silence hung between them. Then, to her surprise, he approached. Not with command, not with lust, but with something gentler, quieter. "I am not a kind man, Lady Ilara," he said at last. "But I am not the monster they speak of either." His hand brushed her cheek, barely a touch, yet it felt like confession. "Then who are you truly?" she whispered. His gaze softened, and for the first time since she met him, she saw sorrow instead of coldness. "Summonon trying to forget," he murmured. And then, he turned and left her in silence, the echo of his words lingering like a ghost in the flickering firelight. The following mornings in Blackthorn Hall were like waking inside a painting, where color had long faded. The servants spoke in hushed tones, the curtains were always drawn, and even the sunlight seemed hesitant to enter. Ilara, now the Duchess of Blackthorn, felt more like a ghost than a bride. The wedding had passed, yet the house still seemed to mourn something, or someone. At breakfast, she found herself seated alone at the long mahogany table. Her husband was nowhere to be seen. Only the ticking of the great clock and the faint crackle of the hearth broke the stillness. "His Grace takes his breakfast in the study," said the butler, Bowden, bowing stiffly. "He prefers solitude in the mornings." "Does he always?" she asked gently. "Since the late Duchess's passing," he said, then quickly lowered his eyes, as though he'd said too much. Ilara's spoon paused midway to her lips. The late Duchess, the name she was never to speak, the wing she was never to enter. When she looked up again, Bowden was already gone. By noon, she wandered into the gardens, an overgrown maze of roses and ivy that once must have been magnificent. The air smelled of rain and wilted blossoms. Somewhere near the fountain, she heard a faint rhythmic sound, the clink of metal against stone. She turned the corner and froze. There he was, the Duke of Blackthorn, stripped of his coat, sleeves rolled. the white of his shirt damp with sweat, striking a sword against a wooden post. Each motion was precise, controlled, filled with a restrained fury. She had never seen a man so composed in chaos. "You shouldn't be out here without a cloak," he said, not turning as he struck again. "The air is cold." "I needed air," she replied softly. The blade stopped mid-swing finally. He turned, his dark gaze locking with hers. "You will find plenty of it here, Duchess, though not all of it kind." She stepped closer, her heart unsteady. "You fight as if you're at war." "I am," he said. "Only the enemy changes shape." Ilara studied him, the flicker of torment behind his poise, the faint tremor in his hand as he sheathed the blade. "Your Grace," she said gently, "you could tell me what haunts you. You do not have to carry it alone." His jaw tightened. "Do not presume to know what I carry." "I wasn't presuming," she said quietly, "only offering." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with an exhale, he dropped the sword to the ground. "You have a dangerous heart, Duchess. Dangerous." "Yes." His gaze held hers, the edge of his mouth twitching in something close to a smile. "You make men remember things they swore to forget." And before she could respond, he walked away, leaving the sword and 1,000 unspoken truths behind him. That night, Ilara found herself unable to sleep. The words he'd said echoed like a soft curse. "You make men remember things they swore to forget." Curiosity clawed at her. The forbidden West Wing called to her like a whisper in the dark. She rose, wrapped herself in a shawl, and lit a single candle. Each step down the hall was careful, deliberate. The silence was so thick, it felt alive. When she reached the great oak doors, the ones he'd forbidden her to open, she hesitated. But then, the latch clicked. The room beyond was dim and cold. Dust covered every surface, but the scent of lavender still lingered faintly. And there, upon the far wall, hung a portrait, a woman, young and radiant, with pale hair and blue eyes that seemed to follow her every move. Around her neck hung a silver locket, shaped like a teardrop. The late Duchess. Ilara's hand trembled as she reached toward it, but before her fingers touched the frame, "Do not touch that." The voice behind her was low, dark, and unmistakable. She turned, candlelight flickering across Dorian's face, his expression carved in fury. "You were told never to enter this place," he said, stepping closer. Each word sharp as the crack of thunder. "Did you think the rules were for sport?" Her heart pounded. "I only wanted to understand." "Understand what?" His voice rose. But there was pain beneath the anger. "That my wife died in this room, that she was carrying my child when she—" He broke off, his breath harsh, his control crumbling. Ilara's eyes softened. "When she what?" For a moment. The Duke seemed every bit the ruthless man society claimed him to be, until his shoulders sank, and the truth escaped him in a whisper. "Shh." "When she took her own life," he said. Silence fell. Only the candle's flame moved. Ilara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. I didn't know." "No one does," he said bitterly, "because I've spent years ensuring they don't." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You wanted to understand me, Duchess," he said quietly, not looking back. "Now you do." And with that, he was gone, leaving her in the cold, haunted silence of the West Wing, staring at the portrait of the woman whose shadow still ruled the Duke's heart. For the next 2 days, the halls of Blackthorn Hall carried an unspoken tension, like the air before a storm. The Duke had not spoken a word to Ilara since that night in the West Wing. Meals were taken in silence. The household seemed to sense the shift, their glances wary, their steps quieter. Even the light felt dimmer, as though the manor itself was holding its breath. But Ilara's thoughts refused to rest. The revelation haunted her. The late Duchess had taken her own life, and she had been with child. The sorrow in Dorian's eyes, the restrained anger in his voice, it all echoed through her every waking hour. And yet, there was something about his words that did not fit. If grief alone had driven the woman to such an end, why the secrecy? Why the locked wing? The silence? The fury? Whenever her name was spoken, the question burrowed deep, and Ilara, despite every warning, could not let it go. On the third morning, she found herself in the library, A massive chamber lined with shelves stretching 2 stories high. It was the one room that felt alive, filled with the scent of paper, firelight, and old secrets. As she reached for a book, she heard the faint sound of footsteps. "You're braver than I expected," came the Duke's voice from behind her. She froze, then turned slowly. He stood at the doorway, his dark eyes unreadable. "Your Grace," she murmured, trying to steady her breath. "You've been walking the West Wing again." Her pulse stumbled. "How could you possibly?" He took a step closer. "Because I notice everything in this house, every whisper, every footstep that does not belong." His voice was calm, but there was no threat in it this time, only exhaustion. Alara met his gaze. "You locked that part of your life away as if it might disappear. But it hasn't, it never will." He studied her, his jaw tightening. "And you think reopening the wound will heal it? I think pretending it never existed will kill you," she said softly. The words hung between them, bold, dangerous, and honest. Something flickered in his expression, something fragile. He turned away first, walking toward the fire. "You know nothing of death, Duchess. You're wrong," she said. "I've watched it take everything from me, piece by piece. My mother, my freedom, my peace. You think I married you for gold. I married you because I had no choice, but I will not live like a ghost in your house." The Duke turned, his eyes narrowing. But the anger was gone. In its place was something almost wounded. For a long while, neither spoke. Then he moved toward the shelves, pulling down a single leather-bound journal. He handed it to her. "If you must know," he said quietly, "start here." Alara hesitated, her fingers brushing the worn cover. "What is it?" "My wife's journal," he said. "The only thing she left behind." Then he added, almost under his breath, "And the reason I cannot forgive myself." That night, Alara sat by the fire in her bedchamber, the journal trembling in her hands. The ink had faded in places, but the handwriting was delicate, elegant, almost lyrical. "The walls are closing in." The first line read, "He doesn't see it. No one does. But the silence here grows heavier each day." Alara turned the page. "I cannot bear the child he gave me. It feels like a curse I must carry. Every shadow in this house whispers his name. Every dream I have ends in darkness." Her heart clenched. The entries grew shorter, more erratic, until the final page. "He doesn't love me. Not truly. His heart is elsewhere, with ghosts. With guilt. I am only a mirror of his sins, and mirrors break." The ink ended there, a blot where the pen had bled through the page. Alara's throat burned as she closed the book. The truth, or something like it, was beginning to emerge, but it was tangled, twisted in grief and regret. Just then, a sound knock. "Come in," she said. The door opened, and Dorian stepped inside. His eyes found the journal in her hands. "You've read it." "Yes," she whispered. "But it doesn't tell me everything." He approached slowly, his voice low. "Because there is more you are not meant to know." "Then tell me," she pleaded. His jaw tightened. "She wasn't wrong," he said finally. "My heart was elsewhere." Alara's breath caught. "With whom?" He looked at her. Long, steady, and pained. "With the one I couldn't save." Before she could speak again, he turned and left, the door closing behind him with a finality that made her heart ache. And for the first time since arriving at Blackthorn Hall, the Duchess realized she had not married a monster, but a man who lived inside the ruins of his own sorrow. The morning after their wedding dawned gray and quiet. The heavy curtains of the Duke's chambers filtered the light into long, somber streaks. Alara sat at the edge of the bed, her fingers gently tracing the embroidery on her nightgown, lost in thought. The memory of last night haunted her, not because of fear, but because of the strange tenderness that had crept between them in the darkness. The Duke, Adrian, had not claimed her as she had feared. Instead, he had simply looked at her for a long, silent moment before saying, "Sleep, Alara, you are safe here." No one had ever said that to her before. Not her father, not her brother, not anyone. But she knew better than to believe in peace. The Duke was known across England as the Iron Phantom, a man who once commanded regiments into the bloodiest battles of the war. Rumor said he carried a bullet near his heart, and that's why he could not love. His enemies feared him. His servants avoided his gaze, and now she was his wife. When Ilara entered the breakfast hall, later that morning, the Duke was already there, reading a letter. His black hair fell loosely across his forehead, his jawline sharp, expression unreadable. The scent of coffee mingled with parchment and rain. He didn't look up as she entered, but his voice, low and velvety, broke the silence. "Sleep well, Duchess." Ilara hesitated. "I did, thank you, Your Grace." He finally raised his gaze, and the corner of his mouth curved, just slightly. "No need for formalities in private, Ilara. If we are to pretend before the world, we might as well not lie to each other behind closed doors." She blinked, startled by the word pretend. Pretend. He folded the letter, setting it aside. "You married me to save your family's estate. I married you to silence a scandal. Let us not play the fools who believe fate had anything romantic to do with this arrangement." His words stung, though she tried not to show it. "And what of peace, Your Grace? You said last night." He cut her off, his gaze softening. "I meant it. You shall have peace here. I may not offer affection, but I will not harm you either." The honesty in his tone disarmed her more than cruelty ever could. Days turned into weeks. Ilara found herself wandering the grand halls of Blackthorn Manor, discovering pieces of Adrian's life he never spoke of. A portrait of a woman in the gallery, a raven-haired beauty with a faint smile, made her pause. When she asked a maid who the lady was, the answer chilled her. That was Lady Seraphine. Miss, the Duke's first love. She died before the war ended. Ilara felt a pang in her chest. She could not explain. That night, she saw Adrian in the garden under the rain, standing motionless before the statue of the same woman. Lightning flashed, and for a second, she saw grief etched across his face, raw and unguarded. The Duke she feared suddenly seemed like a man haunted by something far deeper than anger. The following evening, a storm raged outside as Ilara stood by the window, watching lightning split the night sky. She turned when she heard the door open. Adrian entered, his coat soaked, his hair dripping. "Were you out in this weather?" she asked, alarmed. He shrugged off the coat. "I needed air." His voice was rougher than usual, his eyes darker. "The house. Sometimes it feels too quiet." She hesitated, then stepped closer, her fingers trembling slightly, as she offered him a towel. Their hands brushed, just barely, but it was enough to make her heart lurch. Adrian froze too. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since their marriage, there was something human in his gaze. Pain, longing, restraint. "Ilara," he murmured, her name like a sigh. "You should not be so kind to me." "Why?" she whispered. "Because I might forget. I no longer deserve it." Before she could reply, thunder cracked overhead, but neither of them moved. The silence that followed was thick, charged, trembling with words left unsaid. When he finally turned away, she knew. Something inside the iron phantom had begun to fracture. That night, Ilara couldn't sleep. His words replayed in her mind. The Duke who frightened half of England had just confessed his guilt in a whisper. And she, against all reason, wanted to know why. She didn't want peace anymore. She wanted truth. She wanted him. And for the first time since their wedding day, Ilara whispered into the darkness, "Maybe I can give him that." The next morning, Blackthorn Manor felt different. The storm had passed, but the air was heavy, charged, as though the walls themselves remembered the tension that had filled them the night before. Ilara moved through the corridors, her soft slippers whispering against the marble floors. The servants bowed as she passed, but their eyes held something more than respect, pity, and that frightened her. When she reached the breakfast hall, Adrian was already there, standing by the fireplace, a letter crushed in his hand. His jaw was set tight, his expression carved from stone. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "Your father has written." Ilara froze. "My father? Why? What happened?" Adrian's voice was calm, too calm. "He's been summoned to London. There's talk of debts and an inquiry into forged documents involving your brother." She went pale. "No, that can't be true. William would never." Adrian turned then, his eyes burning with something sharp and unreadable. "He would if he were desperate enough. Tell me, Ilara, how much do you really know of your family's dealings before you came here?" Tears stung her eyes. You think I'm part of this? His gaze softened for only a heartbeat. Number, I think you've been used. Later that day, as thunder rumbled faintly over the distant moors, Adrian called for his carriage. I'm going to London, he said simply. Ilara stepped forward. I'm coming with you. He shook his head. It's not safe. Her voice trembled, but her will did not. Neither is living in a house full of ghosts. For a long moment he studied her, then gave a short nod. Very well, Duchess. But if you come, you follow my lead. No questions. She inclined her head, her voice barely above a whisper. No promises. For the first time, he smiled. A real one, brief, reluctant, but genuine. You're impossible. The journey to London was long and silent. Rain streaked the windows, horses' hooves echoing against the cobblestones. Adrian sat beside her, gloved hands clasped, gaze fixed out the window. He looked like a man trapped between his past and his conscience. When they reached the Duke's townhouse, London was already alive with gossip, whispers of scandal, whispers of betrayal, whispers that the Duke's new Duchess had brought ruin with her dowry. Ilara held her head high, ignoring the stares, but inside she was shaking. Adrian's steward handed him another letter upon arrival. He read it quickly, then cursed under his breath. Your father has vanished. His creditors are demanding entry to your family estate. Ilara's voice broke. He's gone, gone, Adrian repeated coldly. Or hiding. And now the entire parliament knows the Duke of Blackthorn married into a family under investigation. She stepped closer. Then let me face it with you. But before she could finish, he slammed his fist against the desk. You don't understand, Ilara. They'll come after me. I've spent years building this name, years earning loyalty through blood, and one marriage could destroy it all. She flinched at his anger, tears filling her eyes. Then why marry me at all? His voice dropped to a whisper. Because I thought I could control it, control you, control the storm. He looked at her, and something inside him cracked. But I was wrong. That night, Adrian didn't join her for dinner. The house was eerily quiet, save for the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Ilara couldn't sleep. Her mind spun with fragments. Her father's debts, her brother's forgery, Adrian's fury. But beneath it all was one truth she could no longer deny. She loved him, and love, she realized, wasn't gentle. It was war. Just before dawn, a knock sounded at her chamber door. It was Adrian's valet, breathless and pale. My lady, there's been an attack. Ilara's blood ran cold. What? Who? The Duke, on his way back from the ministry. They say he was ambushed near the bridge. The world tilted. She grabbed her cloak and ran. Outside, the sky was bleeding red over the horizon. The carriage stood shattered, horses gone, and Adrian lay on the cobblestones, half conscious, blood on his sleeve. Adrian, she cried, falling to her knees beside him. He looked up weakly, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. I told you, London isn't safe. Don't speak, she whispered, pressing her hands to his wound. Help is coming. His fingers found hers, gripping tight despite the pain. If I don't make it, don't say that. He smiled faintly. Then, at least know this. He leaned closer, breath shallow. I never wanted peace, Ilara. I wanted you. And just as the first light of morning broke over the Thames, she felt his hand go limp in hers. But the Duke of Blackthorn was not the kind of man who died easily, and Ilara swore, if fate had taken him from her, she would burn every lie in London to bring him back. The air of London was sharp that dawn, laced with smoke, panic, and the iron taste of betrayal. Inside the Duke's townhouse, chaos reigned. Servants ran for the physician, blood trailed down the marble staircase, and Ilara, still in her torn cloak, her hands stained crimson, refused to move from Adrian's side. He lay upon the bed, pale but breathing shallowly. Every rise of his chest was a battle. Your Grace, the doctor murmured. The blade missed the heart, but the blood loss is severe. He must not be moved. Ilara nodded numbly, her throat dry. When the doctor left, she sank to her knees beside the bed, taking Adrian's hand in hers. You fool, she whispered hoarsely. You told me not to follow. And yet, here I am, holding the pieces of a man too proud to ask for help. Her eyes softened as she brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. But you'll live. You must, because if you don't, her voice trembled, I'll burn London to ash. Hours passed. By evening, whispers had already begun spreading through the ton. The Duke of Blackthorn ambushed, the Duchess involved. Perhaps it was her father's doing. Every rumor was a dagger. By nightfall, Ilara rose from her vigil, with a new fire in her eyes. Her fear was gone, replaced by something colder, determined. She walked into the drawing room, still wearing the blood on her sleeve, and summoned the Duke's most trusted men. Lord Hawthorne, she said firmly, I want every name tied to the attack. I don't care who they are. Noble servant, thief, bring me truth. The old man hesitated. Your Grace, it's dangerous. So is being married to him, she said quietly. Now do as I ask. For 3 nights, she led the charge herself. Ilara rode through the streets cloaked in black, visiting taverns, bribing guards, listening to whispers that floated in the dark. The Duchess, who once trembled at the edge of scandal, now moved through shadows like a storm. Everywhere she went, men bowed not from courtesy but from fear. She learned that the ambush had been planned by Viscount Haversham, one of Adrian's old rivals, a man who'd coveted both his influence and his land. And worse, Haversham had been helped by someone within the Duke's own household. When Ilara returned home, the housekeeper greeted her with tears. My lady, she stammered, the physician says the Duke's fever worsens. He's calling your name. Ilara's heart twisted. She rushed upstairs, her boots echoing through the silent halls. Adrian's eyes fluttered open as she entered, his voice weak. You shouldn't be here. Adrian's eyes fluttered open as she entered, his voice weak. You shouldn't be here. Then where should I be? She snapped softly. While your enemies sharpen their knives. No, Adrian. I won't watch you bleed for their schemes. His lips curved faintly. You sound like me. She smiled through tears. I sound like your wife. That night, as the storm returned outside, Ilara stood by the window, staring into the darkness, and whispered to the sleeping Duke, you wanted peace, and I will give you peace, but not the quiet kind, the kind that comes when your enemies are gone. The next morning, Ilara received her first victory. Lord Hawthorne returned, breathless. We found the traitor, my lady. The one who told Haversham of the Duke's movements. It was your maid, Alice. Ilara's breath caught. Alice? She was promised her brother's debts cleared in exchange for information. The betrayal struck deep. Ilara closed her eyes, steadying herself. Bring her to me. Moments later, they dragged the trembling maid into the hall. Ilara stepped forward slowly, every inch the Duchess now. Graceful, untouchable, terrifying. Why? She asked softly. Alice wept. I didn't mean to harm him, my lady. They said it would only be a warning. Ilara's voice turned cold. A warning that nearly killed my husband. The room went silent. Even Lord Hawthorne looked uneasy. Then, at last, Ilara sighed. Not out of pity, but exhaustion. Take her to the constables. She'll confess the names. And as the servants led Alice away, Ilara whispered under her breath, loyalty is not born from fear. It is earned through love. Something none of them will ever understand. That night, as she returned to Adrian's side, she found him awake, his eyes filled with pride and something far softer. You found them, he rasped. She smiled faintly. We did. You built the empire. I protected it. He studied her face. The exhaustion, the fire, the quiet grief. You've changed. Her hand trembled as it brushed his cheek. You taught me how to fight. He caught her hand in his. Then fight for me a little longer. Her tears fell freely now. Always, outside, London burned with rumor and scandal. Inside, in that dimly lit room, the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn found something rarer than peace. They found war together. The dawn that followed was unlike any other in Blackthorn history. The fog over London had not yet lifted, but inside the Duke's townhouse, a war was already over. And yet, the real battle was only beginning. Ilara sat beside Adrian's bed, her head resting on her folded hands. For the first time in days, his breathing had steadied, the fever had broken. But peace was not what she felt. There was too much left unsaid, too much truth still lurking in the shadows between them. When Adrian stirred, she looked up instantly. His eyes, still pale blue, still sharp, met hers with quiet awareness. "How long have I been asleep?" he murmured. 2 days, she replied softly. 2 days of silence, 2 days of waiting. He shifted slightly, grimacing as the pain caught his ribs. "And 2 days of you hunting my enemies, like a general." Her lips curved faintly. "Somebody had to do it. You were busy bleeding." A flicker of amusement crossed his face, brief, fragile, and achingly human. Then it was gone, replaced by something heavier. "Valara," he said, his voice low. "There's something you must know, something I should have told you long before all this." She froze. "What is it?" He looked away, toward the window where the morning light struggled through the fog. "The man who ordered the attack, Haversham, was once my ally, years ago, before the war. He was my friend, until I destroyed him." Her brows knit. "Destroyed him." Adrian's voice hardened, each word scraping against old guilt. "He betrayed a regiment under my command, sold their positions for gold. Dozens died. My brother among them. I exposed him, stripped him of his title. He swore I'd one day pay in kind." The air between them went still. "So this was vengeance," she whispered. He nodded. "And it came through you." He knew hurting me meant hurting you. Ilara rose to her feet, trembling not with fear but fury. "Then he'll have his reckoning. You are not the villain of this story, Adrian. You never were." His gaze softened, almost disbelieving. "You still think me worthy." "I married a man I didn't understand," she said. "But I fell in love with the one the world feared." By nightfall, word reached them that Haversham had fled London, a carriage spotted near Dover. The Duke's men were ready to pursue, but it wasn't Adrian who gave the order. It was Ilara. "Bring him back," she said calmly. "Alive. He will answer before the crown, not in the shadows." And so, 3 days later, the Viscount stood in chains before them, face hollow, eyes burning with hate. He sneered at Ilara first. "So, the Duchess commands armies now. How quaint." Adrian, standing behind her, spoke coldly. "You'll show her the respect you denied every innocent life you sold." Haversham laughed, dry and bitter. "Still the same sanctimonious soldier. You took everything from me. Did you think I'd let you live in peace?" Adrian's voice dropped, low and dangerous. "Peace was never the point. But you made one mistake." He looked toward Ilara. "You touched what was mine." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the guards shifted uneasily. Ilara stepped closer, her chin lifted, every inch the Duchess. "You thought you'd break him through me," she said softly. "But instead, you made us one." Haversham's smirk faltered. Adrian leaned forward, his voice steel. "Take him." And with that, the man who had haunted them both was dragged away, shouting curses that vanished into the stone corridors. That night, the Duke and Duchess stood alone on the terrace of Blackthorn Manor. The city lights shimmered below, faint as dying embers. Ilara turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "You said once that peace was all you wanted." Adrian exhaled slowly. "Peace, yes. But now I think I wanted something deeper, something I didn't believe existed." Her eyes searched his. "And what is that?" His answer came softly, almost like a confession. "Forgiveness." Ilara reached for his hand. "Then you shall have it, not from the world, but from me." He looked down at their joined hands, at the woman who had faced ruin and death, yet never once looked away. "You've changed everything, Ilara." She smiled faintly, resting her head against his chest. "No, my lord, you were never heartless, only waiting for someone to remind you you still had one." As the first snow began to fall, the bells of St. James rang faintly in the distance. Inside the grand halls of Blackthorn, silence finally felt like what it was meant to be, not emptiness, but rest. And as the Duke of Blackthorn drew his wife close beneath the flicker of the firelight, he whispered the same words that had started it all. "You said you couldn't give me an heir." He pressed his lips to her temple. "But you gave me something far rarer. You gave me peace."